What we're doing here this evening is we're listening to the results of the feasibility study conducted last year, and it's going to be something that we're excited to hear about. We conducted our update to our strategic plan called Imagine Your Parks 2. And part of conducting the strategic overview of our system, we knew that two of our areas were very special areas, golf and the zoo. And so we needed someone who was knowledgeable about the zoo, about operations, about how zoos are actually supposed to be funded and maintained and operated. And so we brought in the best in the country to help us take a look at the zoo. Thanks to the Friends of the Zoo, we were able to bring in a company to really help us think about what we're doing here. And so we're excited that we are able to do this tonight and talk to our commissioners about it and hopefully make some decisions down the road. We're a ways away, but it's on the right road to making a good decision about what will happen with our zoo.
It's very important to benchmark. It's very important to see what best practices are out there and what the trends are. We're not building a zoo for tomorrow. We're building a zoo for down the road in the future. We need to build a zoo that is for my grandkids, for kids that are coming in the future. So when you do that, you bring in people who can really help you dig deep into what that vision needs to be. What do you need to be doing to really meet the needs of the future? And often that just has a lot to do with having the right people at the table who are visionary, who really see what other zoos have done, what works, what doesn't work, and then how you can fold that into your community to make it work.
We'll talk about it tonight. Then I'm sure the commissioners will give us a chance to go back and review additional information, gather comments and thoughts from the community, and find out how we might be able to fund this new Imagine Zoo. I think the key is to make sure that we know what the people want and what they're willing to support. And so it's going to take some time to really develop and cultivate this new vision.
The Baton Rouge Zoo opened on Easter Sunday morning of 1970, so we're soon going to celebrate our 46th birthday. It was a zoo that came with lots of fanfare. It was a very exciting time for the community to have a zoo. And over the years, the zoo has continued to grow. We've continued to reach out and reach more and more people. And we have a great zoo. We're one of the top 10% of zoos in the nation, being accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And we have lots of great programs. We have a wonderful animal department staff and a great collection. But I think what we're dealing with now is that we know we're 46 years old. And as a 46-year-old, it's time for some changes to take place in just our physical facilities. The facilities that we have today really don't match the needs that we have to reach the audiences that we need to reach. Many of our facilities are outdated from the standpoint of what we know better about animal care today than we knew when they were built back in the 70s. So we've added some new exhibits. We've had the Realm of the Tiger, the Otter Pond, our new entrance complex. We've added a number of things over the years, but we've just not been able to keep up as fast as we would like and as fast as we think the public would like to see us improve our facility.
You know, you have to go back to why zoos are important and their role and the mission of those. And zoos have really a very simple message, which is to connect with people, is to care about animals, and then the conservation initiative. And if those are the basics of it, then is how do we connect with them in the right way? How do we care for them in the right way? And how do we best, deliver new experiences? Because the zoo experience of yesterday is not the zoo experience going forward. The expectations of our visitors, the expectation of how we care for animals, and how we maintain them has really changed. So as Phil indicated to you earlier, what we're really building is a zoo of the future, not one of yesterday or today. And so those standards have all risen. So in order to do that, there are certain criteria that need to be in place. We believe that, and I've looked at the study and said all of the criteria can be met at the two locations, and potentially a third one if it comes forward that could be developed.
There are things that would work in Baton Rouge that may not work other places. There's things that work other places that may not work in Baton Rouge. And what we have to do is figure those things out so that when we have a product at the end, that product is a great product that serves not only the people who live in the parish, but the thousands of people who come through the area as visitors that we also want to welcome.
access to the site is important, easy access in particular. So it needs to, not only can you have to be adjacent or nearby, but you then have to have easy signage-wise. You have to have the flow of visitation, because what people, when they get, what they don't want to do is wait in line to get in. It has to be smooth, has to be seamless, and that's why we always talk about, even from the zoo side, is that most of the time that a visitor spends at a zoo, about 2/3 of that time is really in his non-animal activities. That it's only about 1/3 of the time they're engaging in the animals. So visitor amenities, visitor comforts are really important, and that comfort really starts in the parking lot. In some regard, it really starts at the pre-visit. That the website's important. Is how do we set up this experience so that the expectation is known, so it can be at the highest level. We did a study about a year ago that looked at the feasibility of funding the zoo and improvements at the zoo, of New Vision, which we completed over a year ago, and that gave us then the momentum to move forward with BREC and the leadership of BREC of looking at, now that there's interest in expanding and creating a New Vision, where is best to locate that zoo. So that's what we started about 9 months ago. The results are that there are, we asked 4 questions through this, and the first question was, is there availability of land? Second of all, is there a vision that can be implemented? And the third, is there funding support for that new vision? And then the fourth is there the leadership to make this change going forward? And our study focused on really those first 3 questions. What we found is that there is land available. What we found also is that there is clearly an opportunity from the public side and the private side to fund this new vision. And then we found out that the vision could be sustainable through a new business plan. What we're here now is to talk about with the leadership, to make sure that the leadership is in step with the zoo so that this project can move forward. End result is that we looked at about 8 different sites outside the existing zoo, including the existing zoo in North Baton Rouge. And what we believe and have recommended is that the zoo move forward with exploring further the 2 sites that have been identified outside of the existing zoo. We don't believe that, based upon all of the information that we have and to implement the vision, that the best area to fulfill it is through the 2 sites that have been identified in the parish.
This study was to look at the zoo, specifically how we should reimagine our zoo, and then how we should move forward into the future. And as we talked to different people throughout the community, we were grateful for the Friends of the Zoo stepping forward to help us look at studying the zoo, what we needed to do to make sure that we have the best possible zoo for Baton Rouge. So I'll ask Phil to come forward at this time to just introduce our consultant and share any additional details with you about what we're doing and why we're here today.
I'm very pleased to be here tonight with Rick Biddle, who is with CLR Design. When we started looking at this project, one of the things that we were committed to was to bring the very best people in the country to work on this project, and I am confident that we were able to do that with CLR Design and with Schultz & Williams. Schultz & Williams has worked on numerous projects over the years. In terms of close by, they've done projects with Dallas, Houston, Louisville. They've probably done at least 90 of these studies with the accredited zoos, which are in the top 10% of zoos in the nation, which we are a part of. So it's great to have their expertise, their vision, their foresight to work with us as a team with the BREC staff as we put together something that we're very excited about. So at this time, I would like to have Rick Biddle please join us and give us the presentation.
Thanks, Phil. I do have one correction because I did author the report. I actually am Rick Biddle from Schultz & Williams, so we're the author of the report. CLR is that other firm. But there are partners to this. But thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity. This is now the 3rd time I've had an opportunity to be in front of you as commissioners, and I look forward to presenting, taking 15, 20 minutes to go through a PowerPoint. I believe you have with you the executive summary, or I've seen the executive summary and then the full report. Those two documents are almost 100 pages that we've authored. And I'm not going to attempt to go through those 100 pages, but hit quickly on about 23 key slides. But as previous speakers have said, they've encouraged you to read the document. If you have questions and comments, I know that Phil, and he will then pass those comments on us, and be happy to address it. A lot's been done throughout the past year. And I, again, would like to thank the BREC, Carolyn's leadership, Phil's leadership, and the staff that have been very supportive through this process and helping us collectively to think different. Carolyn, it's great to hear some words come back, reimagine. And that's what we've talked about here, is reimagining the zoo experience, because the zoo experience that you have today is, and going forward, we're really building a zoo for the future. And it's not today, and as we look towards how zoos and how people use zoos and how people use cultural organizations in particular, it's going to change dramatically, and we need to be part of that. And you can lead in that capacity. So again, thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer any questions as we go through, but let's see here if we get this right. So I think you're looking, here's the process that we went through. I think it's just important for you to understand, to quickly go through the process but a year ago, we presented, hopefully you're seeing what I'm seeing behind me. A year ago, we went through with you a feasibility study. We tested in the marketplace, presented those findings to you that allowed us collectively to say that there is an opportunity to look at the new vision for the new Baton Rouge Zoo. And for the last 8 months, we've worked with the staff and with the steering committee and the advisory group to define what that vision is and define the criteria for success. And once we've done that, we went out into the marketplace to look at if there's available sites and if we could deliver on those available sites. So I'll explain this in greater detail, but you can see the steps, the big steps that we've gone through over the last year, and today we'll present those key recommendations. I think it's important, you had a moment ago met a number of these individuals, but here's the zoo team. The Friends have been a tremendous support, Carolyn and her team. The steering committee, a representative of this community, that have been, that we met throughout the past 8 months. We met with them 3 to 4 times in presenting our findings to gain feedback, gain direction. And so they've been instrumental in helping to guide our thinking throughout. And then last are the planners that I was pleased to lead and then author this document. It's important, and there's 3 key phrases at the top of zoos and what zoos represent. They represent conservation, they represent education, they represent community engagement. And I've said this the last 2 times I've been for you, so I'll say it again. I don't expect you to read all the slides. You can read the underlined words. They're the key words here that I'll highlight for you. But zoos, the hallmark of successful and sustainable zoos, and it's really zoos have to be viable and sustainable, is really is the visitor experience, is to create an engaging, interactive experience. That we as users of cultural organizations, just not zoos, are looking to be engaged through this process. And it's about the new experiences that we create. And in the document, I'm not going to show you too many pretty pictures, but we've identified a number of new engaging experiences for the new Baton Rouge Zoo. Zoos become centers, critical centers for its community. It becomes a gathering spot. And again, that's what we've looked to create with the new zoo, new thinking. What we've also looked is how do we collaborate? We've talked over the last months, and even with the steering committee, of how important partnerships are. The zoo has a great partnership with LSU today, and how to expand that partnerships, and with others, not only with the academic side, but with other cultural organizations, with other academic institutions. So the mission is no different. The mission for the Baton Rouge Zoo is really simple. It's to care, it's to connect, and to conserve. And that's what zoos do, those 3 simple things. And that's what the new vision of the new Baton Rouge Zoo will do. Where the zoo is today, the Baton Rouge Zoo today, we've said it's at the crossroads. You're at a point where the zoo needs to have an investment. It needs to have a significant investment. Almost 90% of your current zoo needs to be reinvested in the coming years if you stay there. It needs the continued care for animals, for the continued infrastructure, for the safety of the visitors and animals. The standards and expectation that your visitors demand of a zoo and the care that it takes to zoos has gone up considerably. The AZA, every 5 years, the Baton Rouge Zoo goes through an accreditation process. The Baton Rouge Zoo is one of 231 accredited zoos in this country. That represents only about 10% of all the wildlife facilities in the United States. So it's a very high standard that's met, and the zoo has been an accredited member since it originated. What we've also seen is that, I mentioned this again, these unique interactive experiences. We've outlined in our report a number of those engaging experiences that are fun, that allow people to enjoy and recreate as a family, to learn. The big comment at the bottom there, we've said over and over again, it's sort of been a mantra: status quo is not an option for you. If you do nothing, you cannot do nothing. Your zoo needs that investment. Change must occur. And it needs to be occurred because, again, there's a great opportunity, there's a great need in this community. But it needs to be done from a successful, sustainable, and viable way. What we've talked about from a new vision, the new experiences, it's really a significant transformation. And again, you've heard reimagine transformation. It's beyond fixing what you have. It's really important to think about dynamic experiences. I mentioned this before to you, I think as a group, those are here, is that the typical zoo visitor spends about 2/3 of their time in non-animal activities. That's why it's important to have amenities. It's important to have a great restaurant. It's important to have rocking chairs. It's important to have shade. It's important to have water. Those elements are important because they only further supplement the core message of the care, connect, and conserve message that zoos deliver. This diagram, and I know it's a little hard, at least hopefully it's not too hard, but it's really the 4 elements of the new zoo. And if you look at the top 2, it's really what the zoo does today, is that it's a fun, safe, active family adventure or experience. It's a classroom. The zoo does some wonderful educational classroom programs. But it's the bottom 2 where it becomes a destination. And Carolyn's heard us talk about this, where the zoos, not only here, around the country, but in Baton Rouge, have the opportunity to be destinations for driving people into the marketplace, tourists, school groups, into the marketplace, and bringing a new audience in. I mean, it has an opportunity to be a more valued partner. Those 2 bottom halves of this circle, you don't have today at your current site. You have the top half, but to be a complete circle, all 4 need to be in play from a viable and sustainable basis. Okay. We've said this too, is that Baton Rouge it's a great city, deserves a great zoo. And there's just an image that we've shown at the bottom of sort of some of the new thinking that's going forward with zoo visits. You can see where the animals there, the primates there, are moving between areas. The visitor walks under the animals. They're called zoo experiences, but Zoo's 360 is where the visitor stays stationary and the animals move around you. There's it's great for the animals, great for the visitor, because every time you come back, you're not sure where the animals are. But you really need to think about this as a culture, as an investment, as a key cultural cornerstone. And you really should not settle for less. We've had an opportunity to meet a lot of people in this community, in this region. They're wonderful people. And you should invest in this. Is a transformational change, but it's an opportunity to do what's right. Just not that good enough isn't good enough. So when we through the planning process, we looked at 4 critical questions. Is there available land to execute a new vision? Is there funding available to implement? And once built, is it sustainable and viable? And then last, is the political leadership and willingness there to make this vision a reality? As I think I've said this to you before, change comes about because of 2 things, primarily willingness and leadership. And leadership on both sides, public and private support. And they have to be in place. So I'll quickly just talk about these these four questions that we raised. You know, available land. When we looked at this, is there available land, we set a series of criteria. Initially, it had to be at least 75 acres. To implement the vision, it had to be at least 75 acres. The land had to be available to us, is that it was either donated a land swap or through some sort of management agreement. We were not buying the land. And it took us, we spent about 6 months in beginning to look at that criteria. We found 8 sites. As you'll see in a moment, we have identified two of those 8 we really feel fit the full criteria, along with your existing site at this point. But in addition to the size and in addition to the purchase or asset being controlled, we also looked at the current land use. We looked at the adjacent land use. We looked at the ability to expand. An important land form is, what is the form of the land? How do we use that to our advantage? You know, and is there access to the facility? Access is critical. Public transportation access, road access. Those were all critical components that needed to be looked into the criteria. When we looked at all of that, and it's detailed in our report, we said that there's really 3 options: your existing site, and then 2 additional sites, one that we call Nicholson Carter, which I'll show you in a moment, and then the Airline Highway Park site. Okay, so the 8 became 2. which will again, our document spends more detail in showing you the financial numbers associated with this, but you've got a clean site versus a site that you need to invest and reinvest over a longer period of time. Once built, is the vision sustainable? Again, if we look at in the document, we spend a fair amount of time talking about the attendance. We see it in attendance at the Nicholson and Airline, once built out in 5 years, in the 500,000 to 600,000 visitor range. There's higher earned revenues. Your existing budget, I think you all know this, is just under $6 million. Under Nicholson and Airline, we see that between $12 to $13 million, with significant resources being generated through earned and contributed dollars because of visitor spending. So you have more visitors, more dollars, more new programs being offered. There's a lot more new amenities, from a food, from a retail, from a ride, from an engagement side of things. And there's greater potential for public and private support. Again, we're just trying to comp this, balance it out, but you do have lower attendance. We see over in the next 5 years, if you continue to, if you invest at Greenwood, the visitation goes from approximately 250 to 290 to eventually we think the number's around 370. We're projected at 375,000 visitors once fully built out. But that is in 15 years. And that is after you've invested the $110 million. And I probably have skipped over that minor point, but whether you invested either one of these sites, it's a $110 million investment. The cost to build is same regardless of the existing site or the Nicholson and Airline. So it's the same 110, it's just how do we leverage that $110 million, okay? So here's the projected numbers that I just quickly went through. But it's a 5-year build out compared to a 15-year build out. And as I noted, the existing zoo, Greenwood Park, is going to require higher public sector support. Okay. The other, I think, is just important to show you the attendance. Why do we say visitation is going to do what it's going to do? We've done a number of looks at growth investments of other zoos that we work with. So we have benchmarks to show the growth. But a couple of key things. Proximity to audiences, to your co-audiences, is important. As I mentioned, most of your audience today is driving considerable length to get there, to the North Baton Rouge site. There's proximity to partners and to the visitor base. And it's also the access, which is critical. As you're driving up 10 or 12, you've got to have that access. And both of these provide you with that potential to drive visitation. I think what we've created is this successful transformation allows the right pieces to come together from a funding, from a leveraging of the zoo's audiences, funders, and partners. There's a fair amount of detail in the document about how the funding structure works. But the key difference is the proximity to the larger audiences. I'll also share with you that the successful zoos are based upon having repeat visits. Most people are not unique visits because they're community assets. So people come once, they come twice, they come 3 times. So proximity, ease of that experience is critical. Memberships are important within that piece that make this model work. The last question that was there is the political leadership. This one, unfortunately, remains unanswered. That's why we're here today, to give you our document and to ask that you accept the document. It's critical. This commission needs to eventually to make this decision, because without it, the community is going to sit and wait to hear from a funding side. They want to know what the decision is going to be. There has to be a decision. I would hope that decision comes sooner than later. The opportunity, as Carolyn and her staff and the zoos talked about, it is a bold step. But I go back to my leadership, I go back to my willingness. You have a great city, you have a great asset in Breck, you have great community parks. I mean, I work around the country and I'm just not just blowing smoke. You have great assets here, and the zoo ought to be one of them. And it should be one of them. And you can build upon what you have. If you dream, if you're bold, if you have the leadership and willingness to make it happen. It's always difficult, right? It is always difficult, but you have this opportunity to really engage this community, in the right way, from an education, from a recreation, and from an experience side, and to lead. I mean, as a city, I think that you lead in a number of areas, and from an academic, but even from a park side, and your zoo ought to be there, right shoulder to shoulder with you. So I'd encourage you. I mean, it's what this community, we've heard it from the community. And I'd encourage you to be bold with it. And the vision is attainable. And it can be attainable with your support and your leadership. So the recommendations, I'll say it again, status quo is not an option. You'll be unhappy if you leave it as status quo. A year from now, 2 years from now, you need to make a decision. You need to move forward. There needs to be an investment. You can decide. It's going to be $110 million. If you want the vision, if you believe in the vision, it's going to cost you $110 million. This community it's going to cost somebody $110 million. And it's just a matter of how best to leverage that. The existing facility needs to have an investment. You cannot leave it the way it is. That the existing location, we've said it, is not ideal to make that investment. If you're going to make $110 million, I've got at least two sites that can leverage greater economic impact, greater visitation, greater impact in this community. And as I mentioned, I think that there'll probably be another one potentially that comes about. Maybe, but at least you have two. You started with 8, you got 2. This question's been around for a long time, and I hope that you take the time to seriously look at this options, to make a decision. It is a long-term investment, but look at what zoos have done. There's lots of examples around. Carolyn and her Phil talked about what's happened in Dallas, what's happened around you in Oklahoma City, Dallas, even Tulsa. Lots of great things have happened. Visitation numbers have increased. Unfortunately, zoos, like a lot of cultural experiences, aren't cheap to do. But the return to that community is very, very high. I guess I would just say, I realize I'm probably dealing with my 20 minutes here, but probably 25 minutes. Sorry, Carolyn. But it's the time we've said in our document that the investing in the current site, the existing site at Greenwood, doesn't provide the return. We'd encourage you to continue to explore, continue to have the conversations about the new sites, the 2 that we've identified, that we collectively, it's not us, we collectively have identified. It will implement the vision. I also believe, as it's been talked about in the surveys, there are opportunities to reinvest in the Greenwood Park. A number of new initiatives have been talked about with the community that have been surveyed with the community. To not we realize that if the zoo moves, you have to continue to invest in the current facility. So we're not saying you remove it, but you can do some great things there. Again, further enhancement of the rec parks. So there's continued work, but as I said, this is a bold time, bold direction, bold opportunities for this community that's in reach. The community's just waiting to see how to best move forward. Okay. I'll leave it at that. I'll ask if you've got any questions. I'm happy to do that. I appreciate the opportunity to have spoken to you as commissioners for 3 times. I appreciate the opportunity to work in this community. You have that moment, sort of like that one shining moment, if you will. Not to reference the basketball, but it is a one shining moment, and this community is looking to take that bold leap. We always get asked this question: who else has moved? The only move that's really occurred is Indianapolis Zoo in 1988. Is the big move that occurred. Indianapolis is a great model. It's a much bigger marketplace than Baton Rouge, but it's very successful. We moved from outside the city and down into the downtown area, and it's been very, very successful. Visitation today is about 1.6 million visitors, and it's really a gem within that community. The other one that's been created is Animal Kingdom and Disney, but it's a for-profit venture. But a lot of organizations are looking at what we call really reinventing themselves. So they're looking, but land isn't available. You have a very unique opportunity here in Baton Rouge. And it takes the willingness and the leadership to make it happen.
Well, there's lots of zoos in the area that are great zoos. In terms of the accredited ones, of course, we're not, it's a day's drive to the Houston Zoo. Dallas and Fort Fort Worth have two great zoos, a small zoo in Alexandria, Louisiana that's an accredited zoo, again, and of course the zoo in New Orleans. So we've got zoos in this area that are quality zoos, that are very good zoos, and we sort of complement each other. But I think the exciting thing as we look at this project is we want this to be uniquely Baton Rouge. We don't want it to be somebody else's zoo. So as we look at the exhibits, as we look at the types of things that we would do, we want it to really have the signature of Baton Rouge because we think that's important. We also think that that's a real selling point. When people come to Louisiana, when they're coming to, for instance, for conventions, we want them to be able to have a taste of what Louisiana is like, and we think we can do that in the zoo better than anybody else.
I think it's an opportunity to look at what the zoo can deliver to this community in terms of new, unique experiences. It is not your current zoo. It is much more engaging. It's the ability to connect with animals. And go back to why we're here, is to connect and care and conserve. It's an opportunity to really deliver those three messages at the easiest, friendly, and engaging way. It's the opportunity to do new things like create destination lodging, where people from outside the community come in, as well as residents can stay at nearby and experience the zoo in a whole new world. Is see it at night, see what the animals are like at night, the ability to have a unique dining, the opportunity to maybe experience the animals, by being on the water. Lots of different activities. I think the other thing that the new locations provide is partnerships, is expanded partners. Zoo has a great partnership with LSU, but the opportunity now to look at the Water Institute, to look at other cultural organizations and create stronger partnerships, because that's how cultural organizations in the future are going to survive and be stronger collectively through partnerships.
This is chapter 2 of the 13 or 14 chapter book. We have several more chapters we will have to write. And probably by the time we get to maybe the 8th chapter, we'll have an idea of where we will be, what we will have, some of the different new features that will be in the zoo. We are not there yet, and everybody wants to say, where is the zoo going to move? We don't know yet, and it's important for people to know that. It's a matter of funding, having the right location, and making certain that we meet all of the success criteria that we will talk about tonight in the meeting.
If people have questions like more information, what should they do?
Well, certainly you could contact the zoo. You could go to www.brec.org. You can contact my office to make sure that you get the right information, because a lot of misinformation is being shared on Facebook and other places, and we want the public to have the correct, factual information and the truth, because today they're not getting it on Facebook.